desert in the great American Southwest. I'm Art Bell.
Slamming into your radio like a supercharged nanoparticle of unobtainium. My name is George Knapp.
I'm Richard Serrett.
This is Connie Willis.
I'm George Noory. Welcome to Coast AM.
It's great to be here.
Welcome to Coast PM, the number one unofficial Coast AM podcast. We are two brothers who analyze the world's largest overnight paranormal radio show, known as Coast AM. My name is Paul, and I'm the one who listens to this inexplicable radio show here with my brother.
Hey, it's Chris, and I sure am excited for another great episode of Coast to Coast PM today.
I am as well, Chris, because today we are going to be listening to Dr. Kenneth Hanson's interview by George Noory.
Ooh.
Dr. Kenneth Hanson will be talking to us about the Book of Enoch.
All right, okay. Love the Book of Enoch, dude. There's a lot of weird stuff in there.
A lot of weird stuff in it for sure, and this is going to be pretty novel, Chris, because Dr. Kenneth Hanson is actually a professor of the topic that he is discussing.
Oh, so he's like familiar with the Bible and how everything fits in with this book, and is what is his actual doctorate in?
I didn't see what his actual doctorate was in. I weirdly couldn't find that on the UCF website, but
Okay.
he is a associate professor of Judaic Studies at University of Central Florida. So he is teaching the thing he talks about.
He's an expert.
This is what his work is in. He's also Jewish, and he's talking about ancient Jewish texts.
Oh my gosh, dude.
And he teaches it. It blew my mind. I was like, wait.
How new is this episode?
This episode is from March 29th, 2024, so very recent.
Very recent. Look at Georgie.
I know.
Wheaties right now.
I know. He seemed a little sleepy during this episode, but that's okay because Dr. Ken carried us through.
Yeah, he carried us through. Okay,
Yeah.
I can't wait.
So we're going to be talking about giants. We're going to be talking about how giants were eating people.
Yes.
And we're going to get to a lot of good stuff like that, as well as the apocalypse and the Antichrist, which is very important.
Dude, you got giant angels killing men, sleeping with women, creating Nephilim, dude. Ready to go.
But before we get to that, we got to check in with our good friend Tim Banal at the Coast to Coast AM blog.
Tim.
Today's article: Clairvoyant causes trouble for French mayor.
Dude, those clairvoyants are always causing trouble.
They never are not causing a ruckus, dude.
Yeah, that's it. You got to get yourself a good priest.
It's one of those things where I sort of understand why there are so many laws on the books that are banning clairvoyants in towns.
Dude, you let them get a foothold into your town, you're screwed.
And I don't want to be anti-clairvoyant because I want to be respectful. I'm a big fan of the tarot. I think the tarot is very fun. I have a deck myself, but there's so many Tim stories of clairvoyants who are just hoodwinking people.
You know, they say fortune telling is a lot like kudzu, Paul. And if you don't take care of that kudzu problem, boy, your whole backyard going to be covered in kudzu.
What is kudzu?
It's a weed in the South.
Oh, this is a South Carolina thing?
No, kudzu's all throughout the South.
Oh, it is? I guess it's I don't have a yard thing.
You've seen it. Do you remember in our city in Arkansas, there was this one field that was just covered in what looked like ivy?
Yeah.
That was kudzu.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, I know what kudzu is.
Yeah, you know. Kudzu.
Oh, that stuff is everywhere.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Oh, well, all right. So watch out for the kudzu and the clairvoyants.
That's
Let's
right.
get to the article, Chris. Now that we've talked about foliage. A French mayor is in hot water with the law after falling under the spell of a self-proclaimed clairvoyant who used her powers to convince him to give jobs to her friends and family.
Are we sure we're even dealing with the clairvoyant here?
That just sounds like government.
Yeah, it sounds like the spoil system.
Yeah. The curious case reportedly began last year when Gale de Toure,
All right.
because French, is that right?
Yeah, you sounded somewhat French. It's probably not at all pronounced correctly, but
Gale de Toure.
all right, cool.
Is that French?
Go.
Mayor of the town of Agde received a call from the unnamed psychic medium who also resides in the community.
Hey, I'm a psychic. and your mayor, and I think a mayor really needs a psychic.
Is it that easy to call your mayor?
Yes.
Oh,
It's shockingly easy to call, especially in smaller cities.
yeah.
Like, you could just walk into City Hall.
I should call my mayor and see what's happening.
Absolutely.
I live in
Absolutely.
a very small city.
Go to a town council meeting every once in a while. See
I
what's going on
probably
in your
should.
city.
I
See
probably
what's going on in
should.
your city.
Local politics, very important.
Most important. I would argue the most important politics are local politics.
Although I pay zero attention to it because I'm a bad person.
Well, we all are, so.
According to the police, the woman spoke in a masculine-sounding, calm, and husky voice, which gave the impression that she was channeling a supernatural being from the beyond.
Yes.
Actually, I'm like a really serious clairvoyant chick, so don't even worry about it.
Who buys that, though, if a medium just calls you out of nowhere and then starts speaking in a weird voice?
Yeah.
You're like,
I got like some really powerful Roman officials here, and they're totally gonna help you.
cops say that the call was the first in a series of fantastical conversations with Deatore that ultimately led to him believing that the psychic was genuinely gifted with supernatural powers.
This is a bad mayor. We're just dealing with a bad mayor here. That's it at the end of the day, dude. That's just not good.
That's the thing, dude. Just because someone's mayor doesn't mean they're not an idiot. In fact, it may increase the odds that they are an idiot.
It increases the chances that this is not a smart person.
When the mayor was sufficiently spellbound by the strange ongoing experience, the otherworldly entity asked him to give jobs to 5 of the woman's associates, and he dutifully complied.
Of course, lady. If you keep on giving me this great juice, I'm going to have to hire all your friends.
At some point, the authorities caught wind of the weird situation and began investigating the recent hires.
No, somebody started getting freaked out in city government. They're like, what is this bro doing?
Yeah, who are these people?
Who are these people that all of a sudden are running everything in this small French town?
And I can guarantee you none of them had any idea what they were doing.
No,
They just showed up to work.
Yeah,
And it's like,
give me that paycheck.
I always wanted one of those government spoil system paychecks where you don't actually have to go into the office.
Anything, dude.
Yeah,
I know.
you just get the
Post Civil
check.
War was the best time for that, where it's just like, we're just going to send you money. You're like the governor of some no-name territory out in the West, and it's just like, just sitting there, just collecting dough.
Yeah, or like it would be really cool to be ambassador to like the Maldives or something.
Yeah, there you go.
You know,
yeah.
and it's
like
like
Seychelles.
Yeah, like when you have to go to work, it's like on
Yeah.
a really beautiful beach, and you're just kind of hanging.
Yeah, and they're like, do you want a pina colada? And you're like, wow, if it's business pina colada.
As long as I can expense it to the American taxpayer.
Yeah.
The case culminated last month when Deatore was arrested for illegal interest taking and corruption.
Yes.
That's rough.
Yes. Dude, I love that the French will still hit you with a corruption case, dude. We will not do that in the US.
What's a bummer for this mayor, though, is at least if this was normal, proper corruption, he would have gotten something out of it.
Yeah.
This was just him getting swindled by a mystic.
He may have gotten some great advice, though. We don't know. I would love to hear the advice this man was getting from this clairvoyant, that he was so sure that she was a mystic that he was like, I'm going to hire you and your 5 friends. I mean, this dude just dropped like $300,000-$400,000.
I really hope that it was like really like that it was like relationship or dating advice or just something really lame like that.
Yeah.
That'd be so
you should
good.
Today you should wear your red socks, not your blue socks, because the red will give you power and the blue would zap your power.
Yeah, something like that. That would make me really happy.
Yeah. And he wears those red socks and he's like just like walking around the town like, dang, dude, she was totally right. I feel like a man.
I feel good.
I feel good. These socks are the bomb.
In a testament to the hold that the medium had over the mayor, he likened her to a daughter when speaking to authorities, and as such was no doubt crestfallen when they subsequently furnished footage of her voice-changing technique.
Oh no, what's the technique?
I think it's just dropping her voice.
Oh, is that it? Oh,
Yeah.
Well, I was
I
gonna say once he saw the technique, I thought maybe there was like maybe he had one of those, like Kevin McAllister in Home Alone 2. He's got the talk boy or whatever it's called, and he's like, "It's Kevin McAllister, the father."
Despite conceding that he had been duped by the peculiar plot, De Torre insists that he has done nothing illegal and seemingly still holds the position of Agde's mayor.
What do you think are the likelihood of him getting reelected next year, Paul?
Very high.
Very high. They probably loved it. There were people like, this is the best stuff that's happened in this town in decades.
No press is bad press.
Yeah.
For her part, the woman was also taken into custody on suspicion of organized fraud.
Really would have loved to hear her testimony.
Yeah, it would have been great. It would have been
Because
great.
I wonder if she kept it up being like, no, I'm clairvoyant. Like, I
mean,
gave them good stuff.
Yeah. This is what the spirits were telling me to tell the mayor.
And I told
they
him.
wanted my friends hired.
Yeah. Look how successful he's been.
I need to make friends with a good mystic who could get me things like this. That would be fantastic.
Yeah. I don't know one mystic who can get me a job.
Not a single one.
Let alone a government job with great benefits.
Yeah. Pensions.
All right, coasternauts who are also mystics, work on it for us. Come on.
All right, well, let's get to some housekeeping, Chris. You can support the show at patreon.com/coast-to-coast-pm and sign up for as little as $2 a month to help keep us on the air and pay our podcasting bills. You can reach me at c2cpmpod@gmail.com. That will be in the show notes. You can also find us on Reddit. Our Coast to Coast PM also will be in the show notes. Now, without further ado, let's get to our interview. George Noory talking to our boy, Dr. Ken Hanson, Associate Professor of Judaic Studies at UCF.
Dude, Enoch was like the last time the Old Testament was great, I think.
Was that it? That was the
last one. And
well,
then they were like, let's drop the Jesus New Testament, and y'all gonna forget about that Old Testament stuff. But I remembered Enoch, dude. They ain't gonna take Enoch away from me.
Well, let's find out who Enoch is, Chris. Let's get a little Bible background.
Enoch, a very mysterious character mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, in the book of Genesis. He's just mentioned briefly, and then he disappears. We're told that Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Ki lakach Elohim oto, it says in Hebrew. God took him. What does that mean? And obviously, people were very curious, and backstories started to circle in terms of who this great patriarch, the seventh patriarch from Adam, was Enoch. So who was this person? And we have a whole ancient folklore that developed around him, that grew and grew and developed over centuries and centuries, and spawned what we can call Enochic Judaism. This was a whole branch of ancient Judaism that was enormous in the days of John the Baptist and Jesus and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it certainly influenced the birth of this new movement that came to be known as Christianity.
So is Enochian Judaism considered to be a part of the Gnostic tradition?
So it wouldn't be considered part of the Gnostic tradition, I don't think, although I think it could be potentially heavily influencing Gnostics at the time.
Okay.
Gnostics specifically were focused on the idea that Jesus had like secret knowledge to
Not all Gnostics were Christian. Gnosticism is pre-Christianity.
I'm only familiar with the Christian Gnostics.
Gnosticism
I have no idea. I don't know Jewish Gnostics.
Gnosticism is pre-Christianity. So I'm almost sure that these guys were probably at least attached to the Gnostic form of thinking.
It could be, because this is also kind of a more mystical branch, is my understanding. Mm-hmm. And Gnostic Christians were pretty mystical, which I always found very fun.
They love the mysticism. But okay, so kind of like we're going to go with like hippie Jews.
Yeah.
Out in the desert, kind of doing weird things with this Enoch guy.
Yeah, very much so. I think he actually uses hippies as a description of them at one point.
Does he really?
Yeah,
Awesome. Yeah.
so
I'm
that's a really
liking
good
it,
way
man.
of describing them.
A bunch of hippie Jews.
And he was the father of Methuselah, who lived into his 900 years. He was the great-grandfather of Noah.
Yeah. In fact, the word Enoch in Hebrew, Hanoch, actually means wisdom, or a derivative of it means education to this day in modern Hebrew. He was a prophet, and his son was his prophecy. Methuselah in Hebrew, Metushelach, which means when he dies, it will be sent. Well, sure enough, Methuselah, the oldest man ever to live, according to the Hebrew Bible, when he passed away, what was sent? The great flood. So that was Enoch's prophecy right there in a nutshell, his son.
So Enoch and Methuselah are transitions to the new worlds, which the new world being post-flood, right? It's almost the separation between the prehistoric and the historic. And so when we reach into pre-flood, pre-diluvian myth, we're reaching into a prehistoric myth that is amorphous almost, right? It's just like a bubbling attribute that it's hard to pinpoint anything in.
Well, and what's interesting too about the flood is that there are a lot of flood traditions, and we've talked about that a bit across the world. And often what will happen in those flood traditions is that pre-flood, people were said to live like 900 years.
Yes.
And then post-flood, everyone's suddenly living 100 years.
You get your 80-year lifespan.
Yeah, which is very odd. And I don't know a good reason for that, except for like what you were saying. Like before that, it's very like nebulous. It's like a primordial goo of civilization.
That's exactly right. Well, and it's pre-civilization.
Yeah.
That's the point. It's the primordial, like you said, right? It's the prehistory. And so that's why we get these epic tales. I mean, you can literally, when you look at the Greek tradition, it was the age of heroes, right? And those age of heroes stop around the time of Homer, who tells the Iliad and the Odyssey, right? About those things, but the people would have known this. We are looking at a time that is no longer our time. We are looking at a pre-time. And I think the Jews of this Enochian branch would have also had these kind of thoughts going out there. We are traveling back into a prehistory.
And I also just love the idea, though, that the Book of Enoch is written about this character who has one sentence in Genesis.
Right.
Like,
that's incredible.
Actually, it may be two sentences, but it's just like he was great, dude, and then God took him, and that's it. There's nothing else about him.
But there would, and this is so in the written canonical text that was put into the Torah, there's very little mention of Enoch. But I would imagine the myths that were spread by the people, that there were a lot more Enochian myths than we see that are actually written down. And I imagine a lot of that is because of this Gnostic, mystical, your leadership does not love the populace taking in a lot of mysticism. They just don't.
They never do. Yeah. They never do, sadly. Well, let's find out a little bit about these people that wrote the Book of Enoch.
Now, the Book of Enoch, who wrote it? Did he write it, or did somebody write it about him?
Yeah, well, in tradition, Enoch wrote it. But from a scholarly standpoint, we think that it was composed by a group of individuals, which we can call the Enochians. I like to call them the visionaries who existed in the first few centuries before the Common Era. Extremely popular. And yet, because of its nature, this was a very apocalyptic text, very out there as far as even the ancient sages were concerned. And it was suppressed, systematically suppressed by our Jewish sages over the centuries.
So yeah, I mean, that lines up right with what we were saying. This was not a branch that the authorities wanted people following. They wanted them much more in line of the I forget the actual name of it, but like the Saracens, and no, not the Saracens, the help me out here. Who the hell were the Jewish priests that sent Jesus to death?
The Pharisees.
The Pharisees. So, your Pharisees are probably like very law-oriented Judaism, right? Like Deuteronomy is what they're preaching, probably. You eat this, you don't eat this. You wear these clothes, you don't wear these clothes, right? That's what religion is to them. That's what they want religion to be. They do not want you going out into the wilderness, taking mushrooms, and being like, what kind of weird things can we come up with? You know what I mean? Like, and again, like same thing in Greece, right? The poppy is big. Poppy is opium. And so, like, you see the poppy everywhere. These dudes were doing drugs all the time. And you have some instances, right? And I think Judaism is probably one of them. They did not love the drug use. They did not love it.
Yeah, and from their perspective too, like thinking of like Jesus's time with the Pharisees, all of the Old Testament, everything bad that happens is because Israel was not following the commandments of God.
Right.
And they were very much like, we have to do this by the book.
Yep.
Otherwise, we're never going to get rid of these Romans, y'all.
Right.
And going out to a cave and meditating and maybe taking a drug or two, that ain't gonna fix it.
Well, and then also what happens when you are doing those things? You are opening your mind to new ideas. You are spreading those new ideas around. And what a lot of us don't understand about kind of the way ancient civilization functioned is that they were incredibly wary of new shit. They hated it. They did not want revolutions of ideas and thoughts. They wanted ideas to stay very straight, very legitimate. 100, 200, 300, 400 years ago, I would notice the exact same style of writing, the exact same style of theater and play and music, everything very rigid. They did not like people coming up with new stuff, especially the authorities.
Yeah, and I also imagine there's an aspect of centralization of power that something like this would challenge if you are able to access the divine in your own right and not have to go through the established Jewish authorities. That probably would be problematic as well.
1,000,000%, dude. The idea of private spirituality, private religion was a giant no-no in the ancient times.
Well, Chris, let's get into what's actually in the Book of Enoch a little bit.
Let's go.
Some of the hard-hitting topics in this secret book that was lost to time to the West. It was rocketed in Ethiopia.
Hold up. I got one question before we go any further. And I mostly wanted to keep this incredibly serious, to the point conversation, right?
Yes.
But are we going to get to the UFOs in Enoch?
We are going to get to UFOs.
Okay. Yes. All right. I'll see. I'll keep it pretty historically accurate for the most part. But I want to get to the UFOs.
Don't worry, we will get to aliens.
Okay. I want to get to the UFOs.
The book contains some very unique material on the origins of demons, the Nephilim, fallen angels. It's
absolutely.
It's almost like a who's who of the past, isn't it?
It definitely is, and it's got everything. It's got encounters with angels and demons, 450-foot tall giants who are eating human flesh. It's got visions of heaven and hell, and a lot in it about the end of days. Even an image, a vision of a mysterious character known as the Son of Man.
Whoa! I didn't remember the Son of Man thing.
Yeah, we'll get to that more, but
right.
The Son of Man is in the Book of Enoch.
Whoa.
Which, for those who are not as familiar with the Christian tradition, that is what Jesus is constantly referred to himself as.
Yes, the Son of Man.
And the Book of Enoch is quoted in the Book of Jude in the New Testament, which I find very interesting considering it's not considered canonical.
Is it?
Yep. Jude
that is very
Enoch.
Interesting. But again, the canonical texts don't happen until way late in the Christian tradition.
Yeah.
So again, I wouldn't put too much stock into that. the traditions would have already been out there. You know what I mean? They're percolating in the great mythos of the ancient times, right?
Yeah, because the thing was, everyone just had copies of manuscripts, and certain manuscripts were more, popular in certain regions or certain areas. And the Book of Enoch apparently was pretty popular. I just find it really funny that Jude quotes from Enoch, but then Enoch is not considered canonical. So then there's this like funny branch of apologetics that is like, oh, well, that line of Enoch is true and written by the real Enoch, but the rest of Enoch is BS.
Right. Yeah.
But that part's real.
But that one part.
Yeah. I just love apologetics because of how dumb it is most of the time.
People do love to apologize.
They do. So the interesting thing though about the Book of Enoch is that it's part of the Ethiopian Bible. So it had basically been lost to the West, but it was found in like the 1700s in Ethiopia when people were like going over there and like, oh wow, you still have a copy of this.
You guys are Jews?
So that I found pretty interesting. And then they found fragments of it in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are the like older Hebrew version. And then the Ethiopians were using like an Ethiopian version, but based on the old Hebrew text.
Man, dude, the Ethiopians have been doing a lot of work for the last 3,000 years.
And get no love for it.
They get no love for it. They like kept traditions alive in which nobody had any idea they were happening other than the Ethiopians.
Yeah, they're still rocking away, dude. It's great.
They're just like, we've been spreading this down for generations, hundreds, if not thousands of generations.
Yeah, I think the Ethiopian Bible was solidified in like 800 AD or something like that.
Yeah.
It took the West a really long time to get like a solid, coherent tradition that wasn't just like a general list of books.
There were just too many different types of Christians at the beginning. And you had to essentially have the religious war on what actually is Christianity.
Yeah. So, and it's funny too, because scholars originally thought that there was one church and then there were a lot of like spin-off branches, and that's where you got like the Gnostics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was actually just one giant competing mash of people. And then the Catholic Church is what ended up winning out.
It's all competition. And if the Romans don't make Christianity the state religion, you do not get a solidification of the belief system.
Mm-hmm.
And again, even once the Romans do it, when is the Council of Nicaea? It's still like a couple hundred years later.
Yeah, it takes a little bit. To get them.
Even the solidification, and I'm sure that's when they start noticing it, and it was like, okay, all these people are saying they're Christians, and they don't believe the same thing, and they're getting into terrible freaking fights where they're killing each other. Maybe we need to figure out what actually Christianity is.
We got to hammer this idea out, y'all. We got to
figure this out.
Iron out the kinks here.
Yeah, because this is the thing, right? It's always coming from the elite power structure, right? And you do not want competing power structures. You want, especially when you're an empire, you want that elite status person to be connected to all the other elite status people. And when you got the elites believing all kinds of crazy stuff to the essence of their being, and they're fighting each other over it and killing each other and sending all sorts of plebeians to their death because of it, you have to fix this. This is not good for the ancient world.
Because, and that's the thing too about the elites, is that I do believe they really believed it. Like Constantine waited to get baptized until his deathbed because he wasn't totally sure how it worked, and he wanted to make sure he got into heaven. At
the end of the day, he loved Helios, dude. Yeah. And he was like, listen, I kind of think Helios is going to forgive me if I get a little water on the head.
I do love the idea, though, that like there's potential that everyone who is Christian and follows all the rules could still go to hell because they got baptized too early.
Right, or whatever. You know what it is?
That's like, such a bad system. That would be an awful system. There's 3 guys in heaven and everyone else is in hell.
Yeah. It was like, actually it was Arian Christianity that won, and everyone lost out. God or Jesus was not actually the Son of Man. He was just a prophet.
Shit. It's like that old South Park episode when they go to heaven. It was like, ooh, it was actually the Mormons who were right. Yeah, the Mormons got it, guys. All right, let's get into the Son of Man piece, though, Chris, because I know you're interested by that.
And welcome back, George Noory with Dr. Ken Hanson. Ken, there are some paranormal experiences associated with the Book of Enoch. What are they?
Oh, many of them, which is another reason why the book was apparently banned both in Jewish and Christian circles. We're talking about all manner of experiences attributed to this ancient patriarch by the writers, with the Enochians, or I call them the visionaries, because they were consumed with otherworldly visions. And according to them, this ancient patriarch, Enoch, ascended into the heavens. You can think of it sort of as an ancient NDE or near-death experience even. And we're told that he becomes an angelic being called Metatron, who is the chief of the angelic host and a minister of wisdom. But then we're also told in the book that he's transformed into a character called the Son of Man, which is very interesting because this is the term that Jesus uses.
That's right.
To describe himself.
I was not aware that Enoch, when he doesn't, I believe it like specifically says he is not dead. He is lifted into heaven, correct?
Yeah, it's very similar. It's Enoch and Elijah are the two that are brought into heaven.
The only two that are brought into heaven and are not dead.
And then also Jesus, if you're into the New Testament.
Well, he had to die.
Yeah, but then he came back and like went up. Yeah. But yeah, anyways, what it doesn't matter. But yes, exactly. Like he doesn't die technically.
Yeah. And I didn't realize that he became Metatron.
I didn't know that either, actually. I need to actually just read the Book of Enoch. I've read pieces, but I don't know.
That's kind of wild. Metatron's like a huge angel.
Yeah, he's like a big deal.
Big deal.
Also, so it's funny because when I first learned the name Metatron was reading the Golden Compass series, his Dark Materials, and Metatron is the name of like the god that's like lost his mind. And I remember reading it and thinking that it was such a lame name and that it sounded like a transformer. Right. And I was like, why would Philip Pullman make up this like Metatron? Like, think of something more badass. And then I realized it's actually the name of the thing.
So Alan Rickman, Paul, if you remember, one of our favorite religious movies, Dogma, he plays Metatron.
I forgot about that.
He's Metatron.
Yeah, because Metatron's the voice of God.
Metatron is the voice of God. So an ex-human who becomes an angel becomes the voice of God.
Interesting. I almost feel like I know that story from somewhere else, Chris.
I think I've heard it once or twice.
Well, that's the funny thing, too, is that there's also a lot of discussion of like when Christians started to say that Jesus was God, because Jesus never said that he was God. Right. That was applied later. The closest that he comes is in the Book of John, which is written far after the other three Gospels.
And he was like something, the only way through God is through me or something like that, right?
Yeah. And that's something that Bart Ehrman talks about too, is like if Jesus was going around and saying he was God, like it says in John, why didn't
listen to him?
But also like, why wouldn't Mark write that down too?
Right.
Mark is the earliest gospel.
Right.
So it's considered by scholars to be like a later tradition that was added in.
Well, it definitely was. It definitely was. That the vast majority of the Christian sects that pop out right at the beginning of Christianity, they are vehemently arguing about his divinity. Mm-hmm. Where is he on the scale of divinity? Is he even actually divine?
Yeah. And a lot of the gospels that didn't make the cut or were written, later do get different views of it. Like
they're arguing about it constantly, dude.
Like, is Jesus fully God, or is he fully man, or is he fully both? What does that mean?
Yeah.
The Gospel of Peter has some sort of like talking cross, which is really fun at the resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
They were getting really, really fun with it. They were having a good time with some of these gospels.
They went with the lamest ones. They went with the lamest ones, dude.
No talking crosses.
Just a hint of mysticism would have been nice, dude. Just a taste.
Now you need that centralized authority, though.
You need
It's the
centralized
Protestants
authority.
screwed it up
You're
later.
Exactly right. Which is funny because, well, now you're right. It is Protestantism that gives us the personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
You are right
they
about
dropped the
that.
ball for everyone.
Yeah, they ruined it for everybody. But okay, keep going.
All right, we'll get a little more on the Son of Man.
Known as the Son of Man, a judge, a supernatural being, even a judge in the end of days. Now, the Book of Enoch never calls this character divine. In fact, we're told Enoch is the Son of Man. Maybe Jesus is some kind of an incarnation of Enoch, according to Jesus. You know, as scholars, all we can do is toss this out there. We're not telling people what to believe, but we definitely see these kind of, we'll call them today, paranormal experiences. And it's a shame that modern scholars don't want to go there. We don't want to talk about the paranormal. We just want to talk about mythology. We'll just consider it all mythology. Yeah. And that's a problem as far as I'm concerned as a scholar, because we never sit down to consider what the writers might have been experiencing themselves.
Love that, dude. What a great sentiment. And I mean, I think we've preached that so many times that so much of our science and historical outlook it's too clean, right? It's like I'm in an operating room and everything has to be scrubbed down from germs. And it's like, the thing is that the germs are where the juice is in history. Like, you need the germs, you need the dirt, you need the dust. That's where the good stuff is. That's the little particulates that like send you down like these weird roads. You need that. And when I feel like you just like blast all the dust and dirt off of it, dude, it's not good. Like, you need a little dirt.
And I mean, and that right there is why I really like our boy Dr. Ken, because he's not just talking about, because number one, he does have like a good scholarly view of this is like what the texts say, this is what scholars think, but then he also has this third door of trying to say like, what were they actually experiencing? And leaves the door open for there to actually be something more than just people, you know, who are making up stories, which I find really interesting. And one of the arguments against ever, you know, believing any of those types of things is that once you open the door for it for one group, you have to open it up for all groups, where you can't just say like, oh, prophecy is real in Judaism, Christianity, but it's not real for any other religion, right? Like, if you allow it to come in, you have to allow all of it to come in, but he's allowing all of it to come in and it's not causing a problem. He's saying like Hinduism also experiencing something, Buddhism also experiencing something, and it could all be different lenses for the same thing. It's just how are we culturally interpreting it through our religious beliefs and understanding of science and knowledge at the time.
Right. Cultural cues, right?
Great way of looking at it.
Yeah. Well, and I wanted to bring up, because he was talking about it a little bit, but I'm pretty sure I remember Yogananda, who was a Hindu yogi, essentially, a wise man, came over to the States and was trying to create a Hindu Christianity, almost like fuse the two together and in their parallels, right? And I'm pretty sure that he said that Elijah and Elisha, who were two Old Testament prophets, I believe Elijah was the mentor, Elisha was the mentee, were the reincarnation of John the Baptist and Jesus Christ, and that John the Baptist would be Elijah and Elisha was Jesus.
Yep, very true. Finding those parallels, baby.
Yeah. So, and again, like, a scholar's never going to say those things.
No.
Right? But I just like pulling those threads and the similarities between the two beings and what that means. That does more to get us to the mythos than I think anything else that, you know, some doodoo-brained scholar, you know, up in the Vatican can tell me.
Well, okay, I don't know if the Vatican scholar is like the guy to take a hit at. He's probably getting a little weird with it.
He's probably getting a little mystical with it. You're right. You're right. The Liberty University doo-doo brain. How about
there we go. That works. That works. But let's get a bit more into these experiences too, because I really like Dr. Ken's ideas here.
Absolutely. And that's why I say all of these movements are connected. They were all experiencing something, and it's a pity the scholars, my colleagues, will never talk about that. But they're channeling something. And if you've ever been to the land of Israel and go out into the Judean desert, it's easy to start channeling something. Let me tell you, it's happened to me, where you're out there. It's in the middle of nowhere, and there's nothing around you except this barren wasteland and the heavens above and the sand at your feet, and you can almost hear a voice of the eternal just coursing through your bones. Even it's like that. It's been said, in fact, by some researchers, Jacques Vallée among them, that maybe we're talking about interlocking universes here, and that sometimes the ancients channeled them just as modern people channel them. There's a striking similarity between what people experience today as encounters and even what the ancients described as angels and elves and fairies and various deities. Maybe we're talking about a parallel universe that coexists with our own.
Juicy, baby. Nothing but juice in there. That was so good. You know, and I think the other thing that he kind of fails to mention, yes, I think the landscape plays a heavy aspect to Judaism at the time, right? But what else I think happens at this time too is it is the crossroads of civilization. They are constantly being attacked, constantly being conquered, constantly being moved around. I mean, the exodus of Babylon, right? I mean, the exodus from Egypt. So, I mean, these are huge civilization tearing things. And yet what Jews were able to do were maintain their in-group compatibility through centuries and millennia of terrible atrocities happening to their people.
And I didn't really think about that until I finally saw a map of ancient Israel and the territories around it. And they are just right in the middle of like Assyria and then Babylon and then Egypt. I'm like, oh, this is why it was such a struggle for you all. Like that
Mesopotamia,
sucks.
the Greeks, the Romans, the Seleucids,
right in between all of it.
Keep on going, and then you keep on going into modern Arabia, and you know it's crazy. It really is. I mean, it's like Afghanistan, right? It is the crossroads for civilizations to use, but it's essentially a wasteland.
Yeah. The land of milk and honey is a lot of desert.
It's mostly desert.
Mostly desert.
A lot of desert.
People, no matter what century they live in, will have experiences, and they'll filter them through their own frame of reference, their own worldview, if you will. The messages are there, but they get commingled with our own faith system, for example. And these were pious, ancient Israelites who believed in the God of Israel, and yet they were experiencing some things, maybe some other dimension, not unlike current-day encounters, but they were filtered through their own belief system and commingled with them, just like Stan's voice got commingled with the Beatles.
So that last part about the Beatles is he tells a story about how when he was a kid, he was listening to the Beatles on like an old radio, and then his neighbor was into like radio broadcasting, and then it started feeding through. So the idea is that we are in our own reality, but through meditation or esoteric practices, people were able to connect with something else, and there was like some crossover. But Chris, that gets us closer to aliens.
All right, let's get to the aliens,
we're
baby.
getting to.
Let's get some aliens, baby.
Naturally, George has to ask about aliens.
In light of that, could the fallen angels have been ETs?
As a scholar, I hate to say yes, but I'll say it. Yeah. And there's various ways. There's various ways to interpret this. Maybe we interpret them literally. as ETs, or if you ask the Beta Israel community, the Ethiopian Jews who live in Israel today, came to Israel on this massive airlift, the greatest in human history, and Enoch is part of their biblical canon today. They'll tell you they were real angels. They interpret it literally. So you can go down the literal pathway. You can go down a symbolic pathway and say that these giants somehow symbolize our own self-importance and our own vanity that in the end is going to lead to our own destruction. Or you can try to thread the needle a bit and say that there's sort of an interdimensional pathway here. That's what we're talking about, the interdimensional hypothesis, dimensions coexisting with our own. And when you go into a deep meditative state like this ancient group, the visionaries or the Therapute, the Essenes, whoever did, you're going to hear those voices, you're going to experience those things, and you're going to interpret them in light of your own worldview and your own belief system.
I mean, to think that our ancient forebears like weren't taking crazy psychedelics and like that we take, right? And like somehow had access to stuff like DMT and things of that sort. Like, of course they did. They're humans like us. And of course they're going to get weird and esoteric with it. That's what we do. I mean, look at the late 60s, early 70s. Those dudes were getting weird.
And the funny thing too is that we do it now and we're still getting esoteric and people are having religious experiences on these things and we fully know what they're doing. Yeah. Like we understand the chemical reactions that they're causing in the brain. And just imagine if you just ate this random mushroom out in the desert and you saw God. Yeah. Like, yeah, that's a completely different situation for you.
Right. Right. It takes you on a completely different wavelength. Yeah. I mean, I still to this day say the most religious experience I ever had was taking mushrooms. Mm-hmm. And I understand it's a poison that is affecting my brain in weird things. But yet to this day, the ideas that I got from that trip still are imbued with me. Mm-hmm. The ideas of connection and universal connection, impenetrable to my core belief system now. And that all came from one trip.
Yeah, and those drugs too help people with PTSD or help people with addictions
depression
and things like that.
All kinds of things.
Yeah.
And it's just about stuff. It's literally rewiring your brain. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And that can be bad, but it can also be good.
Yeah. And that's why we need to legalize mushrooms. Or I guess just decriminalize it like Colorado did. I think it's probably fine.
But I would also like there to be a much more guided understanding of psychedelics, which I imagine that the Enochians and a lot of these other kind of mystic groups were there to do, right? Yeah. They were there to help you gain enlightenment through the use of these drugs and meditation and other weird kind of, again, esoteric things they were doing out in the desert.
Yeah. That's what I would want to do though, is I think it's in Jamaica where you can go and you can take a ton of shrooms and have a guide there with you. And then they'll like walk you through it. And then you have like a crazy experience. If I were to do it, that I feel like that's what I would need. I'm too high anxiety. I'm a little worried what would happen if I just did it by myself. I need someone there to walk me.
You should no. Well, first of all, you should never do any kind of psychedelic by yourself.
Yeah,
that's key. I mean, that's asking for a bad trip. But I've also found that, you know, this sounds stupid, but I think there's something to it that you need to be outside. You absolutely have to be outside when you're on mushrooms. I like to be around a bonfire with a couple of friends, and it sounds so freaking tacky, but like you need the space to think. When you're inside, when you're enclosed in a cave or something, right? Which again, that could be a potential different type of ceremony, right? Where you do need to kind of internalize, right? But in my idea, I need to expand. Right. I need my brain to be able to connect and my fingers and my energy connect to all the other energy around me, which allows me to dissipate, and then also they'll become a part of it and allow it all to become a part of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would be interested though to be in a cave with like a fire.
I'm telling you, dude, it would be a completely different experience. And again, like, think of the cavemen, right? I mean, they're doing these intricate, like, grand landscapes on these walls, and they get like, super jazzed up with dancing and drugs and alcohol, and then the fires are going and the shadows and the animals are coming off of the freaking wall, and you're surrounded by it, and you're surrounded by your people and your village, and you're all taking part of this ceremony, dude. Can you imagine the closeness? Can you imagine the like, it's actually becoming a unit, the community. They are one being in that moment.
Yeah.
How crazy would that be?
It would be pretty rad. I feel like that would be a cool thing to experience.
And like, of course you touch God in that moment. Of course. It's the thing above us.
Yeah. Well, speaking of touching God, Chris, we have a caller who wants to know where the Ark of the Covenant is.
Okay. I was like, we're about to get weird.
No, because God
touching God.
Well, because God was in the Ark of the Covenant.
You ever had God run his hand up your leg?
No, that's
Give you a little pat on the head.
Oh my God. No, well, in my head, because there was a guy who touched the Ark of the Covenant and then he immediately died because God was in
All right.
Okay. Yeah, so there is a tie in there.
Okay.
The segue in my head made sense. It wasn't creepy.
All right.
Let's listen.
Hey, happy Good Friday.
You too.
I just, I'm really, I'm intrigued about this Ark of the Covenant. And Ken, when you're talking about that and Queen Sheba and all this, I always think that it's the Ark of the Covenant's under the paw, the Sphinx paw. And I just want to say if you might think it could have got stolen or could
be in that church in Ethiopia, Ken. What do you think?
Could be in the church in Ethiopia. Although Sheba may actually have come from Yemen rather than Ethiopia, which in antiquity was called Cush, by the way. I think Yemen, which we call in Hebrew Teman, is more likely for the Queen of Sheba. But it doesn't matter. These people had a tradition in Ethiopia that Sheba came there, the Queen of Sheba came there, and that ultimately she commissioned the first great dynastic king called Menelik to bring the Ark of the Covenant down to Ethiopia, where it was placed in a church and remains to this day. Although I have to tell you, I have a friend, an interesting chap who is himself on the search for the Ark of the Covenant, and he believes that the Dead Sea Scrolls give us clues to the whereabouts of the Ark of the Covenant. He thinks it's in one of those caves opposite the Dead Sea.
You never know.
My dude is on a treasure hunt using the Gnostic Gospels as a treasure map to find the Ark of the Covenant. Can we meet up with this guy?
That's a movie. That's a good movie.
Dude, we got to get him on the pod.
We should talk to him. That would be a lot of fun. Please.
We got to figure out who this friend is.
Tell us everything that you're doing.
I want to know everything. This is going to be a 4-hour podcast.
Oh my God. That's so much better than National Treasure. That's all I know.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That is awesome. What do you think our good friend of the pod, Jeffrey, would think? Old Jeffrey Shanks would think of the Ark of the Covenant being under the Sphinx's paw.
I immediately thought of him and think that he would not agree with that.
Would not agree with that one.
That's okay.
He didn't bring that one up. We did not talk Ark of the Covenant under the Sphinx.
I don't think I had actually heard that before she brought it up.
Never heard that before.
So, I mean, I know the Ethiopia one because of History Channel things we watched as a kid.
Thank you.
That's a classic.
Channel. Yeah, thank you, History Channel.
Yeah, but the I don't know, maybe that's in Ancient Aliens episode somewhere. They've probably covered it, but I don't think I've heard of it.
I don't think I've ever heard that one.
Yeah. My sneaking suspicion though is that the Ark of the Covenant never existed and we'll
Never,
find it.
you don't think they put God in a box?
I have a distinct feeling they did not actually put God in
You
a
don't
box.
think they put God in a box?
I don't know.
Wow.
I mean, I
That's
don't know.
bold. That's really bold, Paul.
I don't have proof they didn't put God in a box, but
Like, how ticked is God that he's just been stuck in a box for 3,000 years in a cave? I mean, I guess it doesn't matter. He's stuck in a box.
I don't know. I feel like the creator of the universe would have a really hard time fitting in a box, but I guess he could do whatever he wanted.
He can do whatever he wants.
Yeah,
You know,
well,
that's kind of the classic question. Can God create a rock so big that he can't push it?
who really knows, Chris? Well, that will wrap up our episode today on the Book of Enoch and Dr. Ken Hanson. Chris, on a scale of 1 to 5 Indiana Jones type men searching for the Ark of the Covenant, piecing together a map using ancient Gnostic texts found in a cave, what do you give our boy Dr. Ken?
I'm not going to remember all of that, but I'm giving him 5 because Dr. Hanson rules, dude. He is the type of scholar that I love, that is down to get into the mud, that is down to get into the dirt where the rest of us live, not in some shiny ivory tower looking at old books. It's like, that's good. That's fine. You can do that. But you got to get down to the dirt too. You got to get the grub of mythology on you, dude.
Yeah.
And you have got to take it down weird roads, because if you don't, you miss things. And this is the thing about myth, right? It's like, I think about it as like, were you born into technology or were you not born into technology, right? If you take a Gen Z or a Gen AA, whatever the hell they're calling themselves now, their ability to use smartphones and the internet and computers, and they're like 5, 6 years old, outweighs my ability to use these things. And I consider myself relatively capable with technology, right? And this is the same thing that is happening to our ancients, right? They are born into a world of mythos that we are not born into. It has been stripped out of us, at least since the Enlightenment, probably before. So we don't know what mythos is for generations, dude. For generations, it's been taken out of our body. And so you have to develop that. And that is not something that they teach you in university. And so that Dr. Hanson is promoting this, I love. It's incredible. He may be my new favorite scholar of all time.
I'm also going to give him 5. I think he's a ton of fun. Because what I love about him is that he has the scholarly background. He can speak the scripture in Hebrew, right, which is super cool.
Right.
And then he can combine all of that knowledge of the religion, what scholars say, right? Of like, what do we actually have evidence for? What exists? But then also get a little weird with it. Yeah. And often they won't get a little weird with it, and I think it's a ton of fun. And then more generally, I also love his view of religion of like, we're kind of getting some sort of crossover from something else, which allows you to use your own religion, for him being Judaism, as a lens with which to interact with the otherness. But it also makes you not an asshole, because you're also open to the idea of other religions also being able to connect with the other thing that's out there. Yeah. So I really like that idea. I think it's a great way of looking at things. So, 5 out of 5, dude. He crushed it.
Dr. Hanson, man. But we gotta talk to Dr. Hanson about who his buddy is.
I got his email. I may reach out and be like, who's this guy?
The Great Dead Sea Treasure Hunt. We may need to go document that.
Yeah.
Is there a documentary taking place right now, sir? Because I will sell everything for the Great Dead Sea Scroll treasure hunt.
We have to report live from the Middle East on this treasure hunt. I am down to find it. I will dedicate my life to finding this thing.
That's so awesome.
I don't totally think exists, but I would be happy to try and find.
Cool.
Well, that'll be the show today, Chris. Once again, you can support us at patreon.com/coast-to-coast-PM. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you more next week.
All conspiracy, all the time. Later.